We're going to move on to our next session. If people need to have a bio break or get a drink, please just feel free to do that. The entire 4 hours is being recorded, and if you're a part of this, you'll get a part of that recording later. Our next session is focusing on networking and mentorship, and it's going to be your path to professional growth. And again, it's a fabulous opportunity to ask questions from our leaders from across Canada. So please put your questions into the Q&A feature. And similar to our other sessions, there will be a story in our newsletter about this session, as there will be the other ones. So please engage with these speakers and take advantage of it. So Janelle Edwards is our moderator, and Janelle is with the federal government, and she works with the Black Executive Network Secretariat. And so Janelle, over to you.
Thank you so much, David. I am so happy to be here, and welcome everybody to all the participants who are on here. And that last session was incredible. So we are going to get right into it. My name is Janelle, as mentioned. I am a part of the Black Executive Network, and we have three phenomenal individuals here from across Canada who we are going to talk about networking. Now, many of us have heard the quote, "Your network is your net worth," but today we want to get really granular as to what are some real tangible things that we can do in order to expose ourselves, in order to grow within our prospective careers, and as well as to make some valuable connections. So what I will do is I will just quickly hand it off to our awesome panelists here for them to individually introduce themselves. So Melanie, I will start with you first.
Sure, thank you. So my name is Melanie Bell, and I'm with the province of Manitoba. My official title is a program manager with the Learning and Development branch with the Public Service Commission. And I have been with the Manitoba's Public Service for almost 12 years now in various roles, including Senior Business Analyst, GIS Analyst, and Workforce Action Coordinator. I have 4 children aging from the ages of 6 to 12 years of age, and we are a very busy family with 3 boys in hockey, and my daughter is in competitive cheerleading. I love baking and enjoying the summer months traveling around Manitoba in our camper. Thank you.
Fantastic. And if we have anybody in the chat from Manitoba, we'd love to hear from you. So thank you so much, Melanie. And Stephanie, I will send it off to you. If you'd love to introduce yourself, please.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. My name is Stephanie Carter. I work with the province of New Brunswick, and I'm an Assistant Deputy Minister of Corporate Strategy and Advisory Services. I've been around government about 20 years. I've made a career out of it, doing all sorts of different things. And I've really enjoyed it, spent a lot of time in corporate, but also spent some time in the line departments. And my fun fact, I guess, is I am also a certified yoga teacher. So I've been able to bring some of that into work, the mindfulness side of things. So my worlds have collided. I'm happy to be here.
Oh, that's fantastic, Stephanie. And we're taking it to the opposite coast, all the way to New Brunswick. So we are so happy to have New Brunswick here represented. If we have anybody from the Maritimes and New Brunswick, we'd love to hear from you. And Stephanie, that's awesome. I'm glad that you're a part of this panel. And Katy, we'd love to hear from you.
Hi everyone. My name's Katy Lalonde. I am the Assistant Deputy Minister for Digital Innovation and Product with the province of Ontario, which is a very fancy way of saying that I have the joy of supporting teams who build digital products like Ontario.ca, the government's website, our provincial data catalog, and a number of other digital pieces. I've been in the digital space for the last 7 years and helped found the Ontario Digital Service, but I've been with the Ontario government for the last 15 years in a variety of operations, policy, technology, and digital roles. And so I'm very excited to be here today. I am from Ontario, however, I was born and raised in Alberta, and I do have an identical twin sister who works for the government of Alberta, and I think a couple of people from her team were going to join. And so there's also a few people on the call very confused at why their colleague looks slightly different and sounds slightly different. And so I remain an Edmonton Oilers fan. I love hockey in winter, so I'm very excited, Melanie, that you get to go to so much hockey. And today I think we got our first somewhat real snow, and so I'm just excited for a lot more snow in Toronto so I can cross country ski, which is my favorite winter activity.
That's awesome. So what a dynamic group of panelists we have, everything from cheerleading to yoga to a twin and everything in between. I think today is going to be, or this session is going to be absolutely incredible. And just again, my name is Janelle. Here is your moderator. I'm located in Ottawa in the NCR. I'm a part of the Black Executive Network with the federal government. I am also relatively new into the federal public space. So I am also here to learn alongside with our incredible audience who are online. So I will also encourage those who are online, if you guys have any questions, the chat is wide open and we would love to hear from you. But let's get right into it because we want to get some really juicy details as to how we can network in this new era where we have hybrid and we have working from home and we have also social events going on, and how you guys have strategically introduced and have networked throughout your career. So first question I will start with is what strategies have you found most effective in building strong professional relationships within the government sector? So what I will do is perhaps I'll start on the furthest west coast and I will start with Melanie first.
Great. So I will start, sure. So I think for me, I started 12 years ago in Manitoba's public service, but I also worked in Ontario to Katy's. So for 7 or so years before that in the government. What I found that built my career was joining the new professional network here in the province of Manitoba. I started off as a volunteer and then I became the co-chair. And then now I'm the co-chair for the entire network. And from that piece, I was able to meet folks that I would have never have met before, breaking down those silos, meeting folks in different departments, learning where we can grow together and how it just seemed to open up so many more opportunities. And I still connect to folks that I've met 12 years ago when I started as a volunteer. The other thing that has been really great for me is I'm always quick to raise my hand and to offer to help take on a stretch project, whatever it might be, to kind of build my relationship and build my portfolio of skills. When I considered a career change, I don't always look at the financial component. While that's important, I also look about how I can do a lateral opportunity so that I might want to learn a skill set like leadership, for example. My current position, it's the same financial pay, but I'm learning to be a leader, to be a successful leader. And I didn't have that in my previous role. So you might think of what's a career opportunity, but not so much a pay. It shouldn't always be about pay. It should be about how can you build those competencies. And the last, I was listening earlier about secondments. That's what I did. I knew somebody from a leader that I'd met through a professional network. I just emailed and said, hey, I'm interested in learning about central government. Is there an opportunity for me to do a secondment? And sure, right away, no problem. Got their approvals and made it happen. So I think just being able to make some connections straight up and taking those risks and being vulnerable really helped me in getting to where I am right now.
That's awesome. And I think some key things that I can pinpoint out of that is that taking risks, and there is taking risks when you are going to, let's say, join a network, join into a new professional network, which you mentioned, Melanie. I think that is some very valuable advice, especially for those who are newer into the government or perhaps are finding their way navigating. And so I would also love to hear from you, Katy, as an ADM. I would love to understand your perspective and perhaps how you have been able to build a strong professional, course of relationships over your journey in the government.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll first double down on that, like the kind of joining professional networks, and not just as a shout out to IPAC and that you should all be IPAC members. But you know, when I started in government, I actually started as an archivist, and the first thing I did was join the Association of Canadian Archivists, and that just gave me like such an immediate network across the country. I went to I tried to go to the annual conference. I did all of those things, and because I am also very introverted, going to those kind of like networks where it is people who are going through like things is so helpful, because there's that automatic like, hey, you're an artist, I'm an artist, that helps break that tension of being very introverted and not necessarily being very used to reaching out to people. And so joining professional networks, absolutely +1 to that. And then the other one I'll say that's really helped me a lot over the years is to reach across as much as up. Like, I think sometimes people think of networking as like wanting to meet people at more senior levels of the organization, which is great. And like, you can make great connections there, or maybe think about future jobs and that kind of thing. But building a solid network of peers will pay off in spades. One, people's careers advance at different rates. So eventually some of them will also be more senior than you, and you'll be able to leverage that connection. But it helps as you're like doing projects, if you need help with a specific issue, like knowing people in different governments, in different ministries within your own government, is that like when you come across that crunchy problem, you have that person to call and be like, hey, I think you've worked on something similar to this. Like, can we talk about that and what that looks like? And so over the years, I've really benefited from having just like a network of peers who I've stayed with, like as I've moved through different levels of government. I've got, you know, the person I call when it's like really frustrating, the bureaucracy is driving me crazy, who's like my public sector cheerleader, and that he'll always give me a pep talk. I've got the people who I call who are specialists at partnerships and consultations. Like, just building that network of peers is so important and really gets you like really far. And then my last one, which is kind of related to that, is to reach out for coffee and introductory chats when you don't need anything at all, right? Like, you know, we often think of like, oh, I should start networking, I'm thinking about what my next role is. But building those when there's like actually just no agenda, you just want to learn about what somebody does or meet new people and those things, is really helpful. Sometimes it's hard if you get like a lot of requests as an ADM. I get quite a few requests for people to have coffee, which I'm always happy to do because I love coffee. However, sometimes it's like I don't have like an immediate job for them, or I don't have an immediate opportunity. And so reaching out without an agenda is also a really great way to meet people and to kind of figure out kind of down the road. And so thinking about it as a long-term kind of relationship building space is really helpful.
You know what? That's actually phenomenal that you mentioned that, especially going into these conversations when you are meeting and, let's say, suggesting a coffee and perhaps not having an agenda. I think that that's also a really key point. And just actually looking at the chat here, Kevin has posted a question that mentions, do you think that with a lot of political tensions, people are less willing to meet for coffee chats? And they have tried to ask many cities, many in the city of Toronto, for coffee, yet he's not getting, they are not getting quite a response. Stephanie, let's swing this question to you. In correspondence to this question, and as well as what Katy just mentioned, how would you perhaps persevere if you were in this circumstance? And perhaps what are some other tangible things that you would do in order to foster relationships?
Well, thank you. Thank you so much. And I'm really impressed with the answers we've had so far on this. As far as persevering, I would absolutely encourage persevering, but I'd make sure to be clear on what you're seeking and how you're framing that, and maybe get some feedback on that in case it's just in some way misinterpreted as a sales or something, because some of those sales type calls may fall down, whereas they not having the agenda, or more just you're interested in connecting and learning from someone, is a bit of a different approach. So I'd recheck how you're framing the messaging. And as far as the larger question of how to build those strong professional relationships, that's in my time in public service, that's been the key. Relationships are so important. And Katy nailed it when she said, like, you never know who might be a subordinate one day and then is the boss the next. Like, it works like that. So keep those relationships strong. And it's important to do that by consistent, following through, being helpful, having integrity and a positive attitude. and being really proactive. I agree. I joined a lot of committees when I was earlier in my career. I still do, but early on, some of those interdepartmental types of things, even health and safety, Toastmasters was a big thing here in civil service in New Brunswick. So you can meet other like-minded folks in many different places. And I've recently joined the YMCA board of directors. And interestingly, I met people from government that I guess I work with, but I didn't know I worked with until I met them through that board. So you never know the connects you're going to be able to make through volunteering outside of government even. And one thing I did, and I still do, is I may see a trait in someone. For example, there was an ADM before I was in the ADM position that he just was so impressive. He could handle so much. And I said, can we grab a coffee? I just want to know how you do time management. Like I had a specific ask, and he said, sure. And he told me how he delegates, but it was a really great conversation. And I'd encourage folks to do those cold calls, but have a purpose and make sure you're clear on what you're seeking, even if it's just learning from someone else's experience.
Absolutely, that's brilliant. And something that I've always lived by too is generosity goes a lot and a very long way, especially in the world of networking. And in many cases, it's not necessarily about how much you can get, but also how much you can give. And I think that that's also key, Stephanie, in terms of how you approach and how you do also ask for those conversations. And perhaps you can also utilize your current sphere of influence that prior to actually connecting with these individuals, you can ask, hey, I want to approach this individual. Could you perhaps read what I want to say to make sure that it does come across how I'm intending for it to come across? And Jasmine in the chat says, don't burn bridges. I think that that is huge. You never know. Usually the people that you meet up on the way up are the same people you meet on the way down. So I believe that is very key. So thank you for that comment, Jasmine. Now we're going to head to the next question, and it's all about networking. And we also have somebody who's mentioned here that they are a federal employee in the NCR, and however, they live in the prairies. And they want some advice about networking when they feel as though they're the odd one out geographically. Now, many of the notice of interest opportunities that float around or other opportunities posted in their branch are targeted at employees in the NCR. Again, hence to them feeling a little bit left out. And they would like some insight in terms of the importance of being located in the NCR, but yet having access to the best opportunities for advancement. Now, the question that I would also like for you guys to tie into that is, when it comes to networking, particularly at events, and now in this space of virtual, right? What are some things that we can do in order to make meaningful connections, especially in a virtual environment? So how about we start this time? Let's swing it to Katy. Katy, if you want to take on this question, I'd love to hear your approach.
Yeah, absolutely happy to. In some ways, this is it's easier than it's ever been because we are kind of flexing our hybrid muscles a little bit in government, but it's still really hard, right? Like if you're the one person remote or a part of a small group that's a remote, it isn't easy. And we aren't necessarily the best and most inclusive when it comes to bringing hybrid employees in. And so the ways that it is easiest is that people are actually now really used to things like Zoom and Teams and are open to video chat. Like it used to be where you're a remote employee and you're like having a phone call with someone and it's not quite as personal. And so you are able to more readily connect with people. And I think, part of what you have to do is do that reach out and say let's have a video chat. Let's, and work on their time in their time zone if you're in a different time zone and be willing to kind of accommodate some of that. But certainly when you're looking at advancement, sometimes it can be hard, right? And it can feel a little bit like you can't quite get there as quickly. One thing that I've seen done really well, I am in Toronto, which is where the Ontario government is based. And so I'm just going to give a couple of examples of where I've seen others do this really well, is becoming the champion for the remote one, right? Like those people who are willing to build communities of remote workers who are all in your space and create that culture that you want to see, because then it becomes infectious and people from the national capital region or from the kind of provincial capital will want to join your kind of culture and network of people who are remote. And so build that community of people who are also remote as well, because they're also out there and they're lonely and they also want other people to talk to. And so I think you can really like go a long way to be proactive and start to develop that community for yourself. I think I'd also recommend other levels of government. And so, I have team across Ontario, and I often make connections for them. For example, I have, a manager who's fantastic. He works in Ottawa, and recommend like reach out to people at the federal government, make some connections, make sure that they're building a local community as well. One, it benefits our work because it's great that we have that connection across different levels of government with municipality, with provincial level. We're building those connections, and then they also then make connections for me. Like when I go to Ottawa for a conference or something, I can both visit them in person, but then also he's like, and here's 10 people I've already met in advance and you can connect with. And so be some of that local connection too. It really goes a long way. And it also shows a lot of leadership, like for the people you work with in the National Capital Region. They'll notice that you're out there building networks, that you're really trying to bring together that remote community. For those, my other one, I am introverted and I am a millennial. And so I love like online, like typing and texting is like where it's at for me. So I'm one of those people who will like never answer a phone call in their life. And so, we've got the tools out there, right, to build communities, whether it's on LinkedIn, before Twitter went super destructive and we all deleted it from our phones. That used to be a great place to build community. Mastodon's kind of there, but not quite there yet. But certainly there's some good online tools. And so recommend reach out to people on LinkedIn. Networking can be chat communities too, right? Like it can just be exchanging emails. Doesn't have to be meeting in person. So use the tools that are available to you.
That's awesome. And, we have a question here in the chat from somebody who has actually recently moved to Canada from the US, and they're currently going to school full time. They haven't, however, worked professionally in a few years, so they're getting their feet wet. And so when it comes to actually networking and connecting with individuals, perhaps on an online environment, they want to know what are some things in terms of coffee conversations that they could perhaps use or speak about when it comes to actually creating conversation and networking. Perhaps Melanie, let me swing this question to you if you have any ideas as to how this individual can best move forward.
Yeah, no, that's a good question. I think at times is just giving. So I just want to add one point to Katy's point about networking, and then I'll answer this one. I think turning on your camera is really so important when you're in a virtual meeting, and using the chat to converse and to make yourself present. Because I think if you have that opportunity and people see you and you're present, then it's an extra additional reminder to be like, right, there's folks online, we need to engage with them. And I think for coffee chats, it's kind of like speed dating. That's what when I think about through the New Professional Network, we actually have candid questions that we kind of have and we share for folks when they're connecting in one another. But questions like, what was your journey like? Like, how did you get to where you are? Like, what type of education have you been able to that you've mastered or that you've learned? What additional tools should I learn? What new platforms like LinkedIn, Smartsheet? I think those types of questions, like curiosity question and having an open mindset, is critical to kind of stirring up those conversations, and then it just happens organically.
Amazing. I love that. Now, I am going to speak on behalf of perhaps the introverted individuals, because as much as networking sounds great, there are people probably crying to want to even introduce themselves, put themselves forward, or be in a room when it comes to networking. In the instance that you've mustered up the courage and you've actually went ahead, connected with that individual, we actually have another question here in the chat when it comes to what are the next steps after you've successfully connected with that individual and how you can maintain that relationship. So Stephanie, I'd like to throw that question to you. So what are some key things after you've had the coffee conversation, you've met with them through the Zoom line, what are some key things now to continue the conversations and make it fruitful moving forward?
Thank you. And as I think extrovert, it's still awkward. It's not just awkward for the introverts. So it can be out of comfort zone for anyone. But I'd say it depends. It depends again on kind of what you're seeking. If you have a specific goal to work toward. It might be a more frequent conversation. I know for a lot of folks in my relationship network, it's not really formal. It'd be pretty informal, but what things that I personally do is if I'm reading an article and I think, oh, that's probably relevant, something I know we've talked about, I just might flip it their way and say, hey, thinking of you. So it's a very quick way to maintain that relationship and help make connects amongst people. I think it is very important when you do connect with folks. I agree with Melanie about the scene, having your camera on and being able to see expression and to see that active listening and relationship building between the two folks, and really avoiding the distractions when you do have connects with people. But I think it really comes down to what both people want and need from that relationship. There's no prescription of what's going to work in every situation, but I'd reflect a little bit about what are some ways. I do have a Friday morning kind of action for myself. That's two things. It's kind of like, think about who to thank this week and think about who to connect with next week. And it could be for any reason. It might just be someone I haven't talked to in a while that I want to make sure we have a touch point, or just something. I know there's a hot topic and someone's going through something and I want to be here to support. So it's just for me, that's a triggered reminder, like, be intentional and think about it, because you can get busy in your own world, heads down, just working. And it is important to make some time, because relationships really are what are going to help drive your success, I believe, truly, in your careers.
Fantastic. You know what? Those little small gifts of thinking about an individual, if you are actively listening and understanding some of their, passion points, what they enjoy, what they're working on, and if you come across things that you can send to them, that goes a mile away. So Stephanie, that was fantastic advice. And what I will say is, somebody in the chat also, Alpana, also said smile. I think a smile goes a long, long way. And that also sets the precedence as how your conversation will go. We have another question here in the chat. Now, there's an individual here who they're unable to move. And I think that's many of us. We're unable to relocate for a job. And right now they're having I guess it seems to be a little bit of a struggle in terms of obtaining another position within the government. And right now they're only able to take on an interdeterminate if offered, or a higher level acting. However, they network quite often. They have mentors. They even co-chair, and they're even on an advisory council. So this sounds to me as somebody who is perhaps implementing many of what we're doing, yet they're still not seeing the result. What would you perhaps recommend for that individual as to how they can, in fact, move forward in their career, provided that they can't move, they can't relocate, yet they're still doing all that they can do in order to move forward? Melanie, how about I send that off to you?
Yeah, what I would suggest is potentially joining an employee network or community of practice, if they haven't already done that, or also just doing a stretch project. Oh, sorry, I was just seeing someone can't turn the camera on. Is there an opportunity that they could potentially lead a project and gain different skill sets to kind of help build their competencies? I think those are some of the areas that they could look at. Perhaps somebody else on the panel might have additional suggestions.
I don't know how to raise my hand, but I'm just going to jump in if that's okay.
Yeah.
I wonder too, and I know all this stuff it's easier said than done, and we don't know all the context necessarily, but even looking at, Katy alluded to it, but starting your own network, starting your own community, and that really does demonstrate leadership. I know it's challenging when you want to move and you're ready to move and you feel like people, maybe you're not getting the break and the chance, but stick with it. You will just keep working hard, keep demonstrating, keep doing the things you're doing. It sounds like you're doing a lot of the right things, putting yourself out there and joining. Don't give up. We need to, sometimes the timing needs to be right. And I talk to your supervisor if you haven't already, because just them knowing that might help open some doors, and them also help you develop in the right areas. But it is challenging. I've been in my career at times where I'm just like, oh, I want to move ahead. I'm ready for the next thing. And sometimes patience, I mean, I do believe it will work out. Just don't give up and keep doing a good job at what you're doing.
No,
Katy.
fantastic. It actually reminds me of an analogy that somebody had told me about once upon a time about, imagine rolling a snowball up a hill. And at first the snowball starts very, very small. And as it rolls up this hill, it gets bigger and bigger and bigger. And then eventually when you get to the top of the hill, you can imagine the amount of stress and pain and being tired rolling that large snowball up the hill. And then eventually when you get to the top of the hill and then that snowball goes down the hill, that's when your breakthrough happens. So in this time when you are most likely moving up the hill and doing the things that necessarily to do in order to network, do know that there is going to be a breaking point. You just have to remain steadfast. Katy, did you want to add anything to this particular question?
The only thing I would add is just thinking really broadly about what public service is. So, obviously different levels of government, but the broader public sector often has really impactful jobs as well that are part of that kind of broader public administration. And so, I think that sometimes helps us get outside our comfort zone too and get like different facets of experience that can then help you advance if you're interested in like the federal government proper versus kind of doing that. So thinking about agencies and the BPS, I think is a really good place to also expand both your network, but then also your career possibilities too. And then just double down, it's hard to get government jobs. It's hard to get permanent government jobs. Like I was on contract for a long time when I started. Those things take a long time, and sometimes they're not also a ladder. I like the career as a jungle gym. Like you're going to move around, you're going to go up, you're going to go down. I was a manager for a while. I went back to being an individual contributor, then went back up to being a manager. Like there's lots of ways that careers happen. And so it can be frustrating. I totally get it. I've definitely been there. It can be tough to land that kind of permanent role in a place that you're really happy in.
Fantastic. You know what? We're having such a fruitful conversation here, and I can take the next question in so many different directions. So I'm going to do my best to kind of compress some of the questions that we have to answer as many as possible in the short amount of time that we have left. So now that we've actually spoken about perhaps within our own communities, starting our own little groups, or perhaps networking laterally and not just considering vertical networking, my question to you is, how would you recommend government officials or government professionals now utilizing social media platforms like LinkedIn in order to expand their network? I think it's inevitable that nowadays many of us, if not most of us, are on these social media platforms. And it's also a testament to how great these platforms can be for networking. And in addition to that, I would also like to know, in terms of how mentorship can also work with networking, if you guys have any specific examples, not only how you guys have utilized social media, but also your perspective when it comes to mentoring and mentorship for those who are looking to either be mentored or who are in a position to mentorship. And perhaps Stephanie, we'll start with you first.
Thanks. Wow, that's a lot, but really great questions. And I'll start with the LinkedIn piece, or just social media in general. I think absolutely LinkedIn is an excellent platform to grow your network. I think it's important to take your time with your profile. That's your brand. That's the face of you. So it's important to present yourself, to think about like, what do I want others' first impressions of me to be, and make sure you're succinct, articulate, and have the highlights of the right things, have a professional photo, and get someone, again, proofread that and be open to feedback, and you can show someone and say, how am I coming across, and make sure you present yourself in the way you really want to do. And a first step, if you're not there now, is connect with people you already know. Connect with people you already work with, people you went to school with, colleagues, professors, whatnot. And then there's people you may know function, and you can build out from there. There's nothing wrong with reaching out cold and asking for a connect. It's nice to have some context around that, just because sometimes people are curious why you're connecting with them, but I think that's a great idea to connect with folks and let them know here's why I'd like to have a connect with you, and keep your profile updated. There's events on there. There's learning, like I love it. There's good even infographics. That's my favorite thing. I'm always saving all these pictures and you really can find a lot about what you're seeking. So use LinkedIn. Careful what you post. Don't be critical of your employer. I think that's probably the big advice I would give you, but use that to connect with others. And then as far as mentorship's been a really big part of my career, formal and informal, mostly informal. But if you're seeking a mentor, which I think it's a great idea to have someone in your court to get advice from, I'd sit down and think a little bit about what do I want? Am I looking for career advice? Am I looking for work, personal life, that focus? Am I looking for situational advice as things come up? Do I want to learn more about the organization? Like, what is it you really want? And then seek that out. And you could do that talking to your boss, talking to other people you trust, like who would be a good mentor, and decide, like, do you want something formal? Do you want something informal? Are you looking for someone like you? Are you looking for someone not like you? Like, thinking about all those sorts of things and what kind of frequency you might be interested in. And then they have that in mind when you're reaching out to folks and asking, here's why I'm seeking you out and what I'd hope you could offer. And then what a lot of mentors say is they get just as much out of the relationship as the mentee, because it really is a two-way in most cases. So I'd say be willing to share your perspective on things too with your mentor, because they more than likely would be very interested to hear your opinion on your perspectives on various things. But I'm going to stop there in the interest of time.
I think I'd add to that is maybe on the informal mentorship. So I've never had a formal mentor in my public service career, mostly because I'm so introverted and too shy to ask. I think if ChatGPT had existed when I started, I would have just asked them to draft me emails to send, but it didn't. And so I never asked for a mentor. However, I've had a lot of informal mentors. A lot of the decisions I've made, particularly in the latter half of my 15 years in government, have been about working for leaders who I think I can learn from. And so, if you are lucky and you do have a bit of an opportunity to choose your job and pick a place to work, finding the places where it's leaders that you're interested in and interesting to learn from. I've had such incredible mentorship from the people that I've worked from. I learned a lot about people who delegate opportunity versus delegating work, and just had that great experience of people who I can just see day to day how they lead an organization. And so, if you are thinking of where you want to work, think about the leadership style you want to learn from and you want to work from, because informal mentorship goes a really long way. There's a huge opportunity there. And so I would just add that to the mix. Absolutely. If you can find a formal mentor, as Stephanie said, be really concrete about what you're hoping that they can help you with and bring something to the table. People who I work with, who I mentor, I'll also encourage we have regular meetings, we'll meet once a month or once a quarter. But then I encourage them really strongly to call me in situations. If you have it's a project you're just struggling with, or a meeting that went really poorly and you just need to debrief, is it mentorship's great if it's structured, but it's also really useful point in time to be able to pick up the phone or message somebody and be the wildest thing just happened. This is how I handled it. What could I have done differently? And so think of mentorship as both a structured and unstructured space to be as well.
Fantastic. I think that's awesome. Yes, Melanie, go ahead.
No, I was just going to add to Stephanie's point about LinkedIn. Is one thing that I try to do is, and I didn't do it for this one, but is to post events that I'm planning to attend. Or if I've hit a milestone or we've got an award or for something, I try to be present and active on LinkedIn, just to kind of share some stories and to kind of share those that I might not have connected through when I've added them as a connection, but this kind of shows them a little bit of the side of me that's the social or the the learning space that I'm growing in. So I just try to do it as often as I can. And the other piece I was going to share is just on having a coach, like a leadership coach. Potentially you could reach out, and that's where you can actually have like a session where you can converse about, this is my situation. What do you think I could do in these moments, or what can I do differently? So there is that opportunity for a leadership coach aside from the informal and formal mentors.
You know what? That's brilliant. Coaching, mentorship, all of these pieces help tremendously. And it's about not only will this individual who you're looking to have mentor you can help you, but also what can you provide in return. So thank you guys so much for that. We have somebody in the chat who is very encouraged that this is a panel of all women in the government. So they're very excited, and they want to talk a little bit or ask a little bit about your experiences in the government and any challenges that you guys have had to overcome. And I also want to tie that into another question here, or a comment where somebody has mentioned that they believe that there was an individual that they know of that attempted to put some information online, and because of perhaps how they look like and their status in the government, particularly in this case, if it was a person of color, they believe that their information online was unfortunately tampered with, which left them, feeling pretty distraught about that circumstance. So that's a challenge, right? Somebody who may go online and attempt to put forth information, and then unfortunately they get assailed in that instant. So can you ladies speak to your individual career path, any challenges you guys have had to overcome being women in the government?
I'm happy to go first with that. So I work in the digital space, and before that I worked in the IT organization. And I have a lot of privilege. I'm a white woman from a relatively well-off family. I went to university, but women in technology are rare still. And so certainly, I've had many times in my career where I've been the only woman in the room, certainly the youngest woman in the room. Doesn't help that I also look a lot younger than I am. So people often confuse me for like students or co-op students. And so I get that kind of experience of like not being the person in the room who fits in with everyone else. I ran a website team and had a developer try to explain like DevOps and Agile to me. And I was like, yes, I do this every day. I don't need you to explain this to me. Like, it happens a lot, and it's hard. Like it's hard to do that every day, to have that kind of questioning. And that's part of like my initial comment was build networks like across as much as up, is because you need those other people who you do relate to, and who you can, build those networks of people who you can call and be like, I was just like, these people are going to drive me crazy. And you can message them on Slack or on Teams and be like, I can't believe this, share those memes with them, like really like who can commiserate a bit and build that, like, so that they're not just gaslighting you all the time. And so, having those groups that you can go back to, those employee networks, those other people who are going through similar things, is so helpful. And then just, making sure that you're standing up for other people like you too, right? Like I do have a lot of privilege, and I try to use that to help other people who don't have as much as I do. And I'm purposeful in things like, who you hire, but then also like what projects I put people on, giving high profile projects to people who are diverse, making sure that we're like really encouraging an environment of belonging. And it's a process. And then some of it is just like when you do have a bit of power, I'm very lucky that I have more power now because I am an executive, is calling out when people are being discriminated against and using that. And that comment about, posting on LinkedIn or posting on social media, the internet is full of trolls. Strong believer in not feeding the trolls and encouraging them. But sometimes you've got to step in and you've got to be the person to call it out. And if you're a person who does have some power and some privilege, using that in order to make sure that other people are safe, it's an important aspect of being a good public servant and a good leader. And so, if you are really junior, you're a new professional and you don't yet feel comfortable doing that, that's okay. It's also okay to not publicly, but like behind the scenes. I've had people message me and be like, hey, I noticed this other person commented to somebody else and I didn't think it was respectful. I want to flag it for you so you know it, but I wasn't comfortable calling out, because then as a leader, I can go and call it out and do that on their behalf. So finding that person who is a safe space for you where you can call that out to see if they can step in and use their privilege is also really helpful.
Yeah, there's something to be said about allied support. I think that that's a fantastic descriptive way of how we can conquer and how we can all ultimately work together. Stephanie, I would love to hear your perspective.
Sure. All great points. I was thinking about my career, and I was thinking I'll go back to the beginning where maybe it was more me than what was happening around me. I was maybe a little more quiet, a little more reserved, a little less confident, and took that made my leadership journey maybe take a little longer because I blended into the background a bit. And so my advice would be to know you're at the table for a reason and to bring your value and have confidence in your value. But I do think the workplace is changing in a good way. I hope, at least my experience, it's voices of new professionals are just as important and equal to those of seasoned professionals. So it's important to know you're valued. I do also know I'm privileged. I do feel like as a senior leader, sometimes I'm not taken as serious as men, seriously, and that just means I try harder and do more, which I guess is not fair. But my response to it is, I'm going to show you, kind of thing. Like it, and I do think we have to maybe prove ourselves a little more than it's just kind of a given that this man will be a good leader, but the woman has to try harder. So because of that, I cheerlead other women. I cheerlead everyone, but I especially cheerlead other women. I seek out women mentors. I mean, I work with a lot of men, and so I get a lot of coaching and mentorship from men, but I actively seek out women because I don't have as many around me. I seek out the diversity, and I find my tribe. And like, it really is celebrating other women. Like we need to be allies of each other. And someone honestly sent me a text today. One of my colleagues, she was in a meeting and it was with a consultant, so not a government person. And he said, I'll go slow because I know women need to take their time. And I was like, you are kidding me that people still say these things out loud. I don't see and feel that like on a regular basis, but I was like, whoa, that's and she didn't really know how to handle that, right? Like that's an awkward situation to be in. But my final point will be, like, think of how good you feel when something good happens to you, like the authentic, like I feel so great and empowered, whatever. If you can turn that feeling over to great things happening for other people, think about the exponential, the good that you're going to experience. Like if you can be just as happy if another person succeeds. So I'd say let's just all shift our mindset and kind of help transition a culture to like that people don't feel like they have all these challenges. And I get it, there's challenges, but we can do our part to make it easier for other people and not be these people making the comments like this man did to my colleague. Sorry, I'm not trying to bash anyone. I just was like, what a timely comment for someone to make.
That's awesome. Thank you so much for sharing. And you know what, Stephanie, you're getting applaud in the chat. They're thanking you for your vulnerability. And I know that there's so much that we endure that perhaps we don't talk about, that we, unfortunately go through, whether you're a person, individual of color, whether you're a woman. And so thank you for being very vulnerable and letting us know about your circumstance. And Melanie, I would love to also hear from you. What are some perhaps challenges that maybe you have overcome? And what advice would you give to the audience today?
Yeah, so for me, I think it's more of a personal situation, but I have, like I mentioned in my bio, I have 4 kids. So I always find that there's so much pressure for me being a working mom and dealing with everything after hours. So what I've really had to start to think about is when I'm at work, I'm giving it 110%. After work, after 4 o'clock, then it's about my kids, and really finding that balance so that I don't have the mom guilt of not being with my kids at an event or something, because I'll take the time off for that. But that's been my biggest struggle, is just not being everywhere all the time, and being able to be at hockey, be at work, and giving my 100%, or when a kid is sick. But what I've really leaned on is my partner to say, okay, I can't do this. Can you help me out? Or family or friends, but it can't just be all on me, that pressure. So I found that that's been a big weight lifted off my shoulders, that I do want to be a leader. I want to have my daughter to be proud, and to know that women can be in the workforce and actually and have children and be successful, and for my kids to see women in the workforce, both men, the boys and the girls. So for me, that is where, and it frustrates me at times where I can't go to something after work, a function, and I'm like, no, I gotta go to this hockey, or I have to do this. But if I know in advance, I'll make the time and be at that work function. But I think there just needs to be that yin and yang of the balance of the work-life balance, so that I can be available and be an awesome professional, and also a great parent, or do other things outside of the workplace.
Can I just like big plus to your ask for help piece? Like I like some of that is like so hard for people to do, women to do. And then we are all in public service because we want to help other people, right? Like public service is a great mission. And it took me so long into my career to realize that like if I ask for help, people are actually really excited to help. Like, because that's why we're all here, is to like help, right? And so that's also a great way to build connection and build like being the person who's willing to ask for help. People will then ask you in return. And like that for me was like such a huge lesson that took me way too long to learn. And so thank you for saying that, because that is like a really tough thing to actually do. But like it does help build that connection, because then people also know they can come to you for help also.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. You know what? And I absolutely have to agree with what Katy said. And also, Melanie, you made some really key points. Many of us wear many different hats, and we have to shift those hats throughout the day. And it can become very overwhelming. So having a level of understanding, compassion, and also being the person to raise your hand and say, you know what, I do need help. I do need to exercise my right to ask for help, to which each and every one of us do have that right and should exercise it. And we have some really great questions here in the chat. Just quickly, we have somebody who's asking about confidence. So Stephanie, you even mentioned that when sometimes you feel as though you're in rooms and you perhaps get put down or feel overlooked, that you get this gusto in you, and you said, well, look at me go. Where do you get that confidence from? Perhaps even in a networking environment, or when you are trying to step outside your comfort zone. What have you perhaps done in the past? What are you currently doing in order to be more confident?
Let's see. Something I did a little while ago, a few years ago, is I sat back and reflected, what value am I bringing? Because I was at a point in my career trying to make some decisions about where do I want to go next. And so even reflecting and being able to articulate, is my Zoom flicking weird? Because it looks weird to me. I don't know why that's happening. I'm sorry. Anyway, I'll go quick because I might lose you. But it's just reflecting on your worth and revisiting that. And when you have a good week, making note, journaling after the fact. I'm still here. Can you hear me? Oh.
Yes, I can. Yes.
Okay, I don't know what's going on with the video. I'm so sorry about that. Anyway, so it's revisiting that and doing a good job, and people recognizing that. So don't lose sight and make the space to look back and see how far you've come. And it's when you look at it as a whole, it's easy to see the impact you can have. But maybe you have a bad day and you're in the dumps and you feel like, what am I even doing? I heard someone earlier talk about imposter syndrome. So we all go through those days, but that's why it's important to reflect back and see, no, and talk to people that can help boost you too. Like keep your people close that are going to support you and cheerlead you too.
Absolutely. Melanie, Melanie, I'll give it up to you. If you can tell us maybe in 30 seconds, some things that you do in order to boost your confidence.
Dress for success. That's what I do. I put on a nice blazer. I practice what I'm going to say if I need to do a big presentation ahead of time to some people that I can trust, but I come in being extremely confident by dressing the part of how I want to feel in the moment. Katy, over to you.
Katy, yes,
And
for you.
two really practical ones. One trick someone taught me is if you're writing an email about yourself, pretend you're writing about someone else. Like, because you will not pump yourself up, but if you pretend you're writing about someone else, you will pump them up. And so do that. The second one is to draft your email and then go to ChatGPT and say, "Hey, ChatGPT, make this email sound more confident," and it will, and it'll do a fantastic job. Obviously, don't put your sensitive information into ChatGPT if you work for government. However, it's like a great tool for that. Like, you can go in and write an email, and it'll take out all your like passive language, and it will make it like more direct and more confident sounding for you. So then again, you don't have to do it for yourself, and then you just copy and paste it. It somehow just like feels better when you don't have to be that confident person. AI can be confident for you.
Awesome. I think that that's brilliant. We had a question earlier with regards to time management. Utilizing tools like ChatGPT, for example, can absolutely help with that. Connecting with your colleagues, seeing where you can fill in the gaps in terms of your time and how you can utilize your resources that you have around you. So this has been a fantastic conversation. If I can sneak in one more question, because I think that this is a very fruitful question, considering the temperament of our world today, and that is with regards to diversity. So as we know, the government is a very diverse culture and a very diverse workplace. So how do you ensure your professional networks reflects this diversity, and why is it important for career growth? Quickly, Katy, we'll start with you.
Yeah, absolutely. This is super important. I'm really lucky. I work for the Ontario Public Service, and they have a number of programs in place. They have a couple of different diversity mentorship programs that I am a member of, and I have every year a new diversity mentee, and then I collect them. And so I've been doing it for 4 or 5 years, and I just keep them in my mix. And so, if your government does have a program that's specifically focused on diversity mentorship, that's a fantastic way to do it. Otherwise, I just say be really purposeful. Like for myself, I try to be very purposeful. I get a lot of reach outs. I speak at a lot of conferences, so I get a lot of people reaching out. And so I do try to be really purposeful about how I'm spending my time and who I'm spending my time with to encourage building that diversity within my network as well. And so making sure that you are being thoughtful about it is really helpful. But often there are formal programs in place that you can use as you can leverage too.
Fantastic. Melanie, would you like to add in a point or two? I'll give you maybe about 10 seconds.
Wow, 10 seconds. Okay, yeah, I would just say if you're building a course or if you're building any type of programs or initiatives, to just think of those community of practices as well and those employee networks, because there's tremendous knowledge in there that could be shared and provided to really make sure that those groups are heard. Sorry, that was more than 10 seconds. Go, Stephanie.
Okay, I'll go quick just to save time. I agree with both of the panelists, but I'd also say engage in those activities or join groups that really attract people from various backgrounds, cultures, and interests. Like attend events. Like for me, the YMCA, that is a very diverse board. So be intentional, because you got to keep those biases in check and constantly challenge your thinking too. Self-reflection.
Fantastic. Well, ladies, this was a fantastic session. I am so grateful to be a part of this with you all. I think we left the audience with a lot of tangible information. Thank you so much, says Jasmine. Ditto. We're getting a lot of feedback here in the chat, and we thank you guys so much for taking the time out of your day. And I will head it back to David.
All right, thank you. Another great session. For me, you sharing your personal stories really made it. So thank you for doing that. It just made it great, and we had so many wonderful comments, and we're looking forward to also including you in our January newsletter.